We're on verse 15 and of Revelation 17. And we're about to get to so I got to read in Pilgrim's Progress, the Battle of Armageddon. Oh, is that just cool for somebody that has a lot of voice, wants to use all the voices? And so it was the good king coming back and putting down Apollyon and putting down Beelzebub, and they were as they're getting tossed in the fiery furnace and the lake of fire, and it was just great. My 6 and 4-year-old, their eyes are like, whoa, it was a lot of fun, lots and lots of fun. So we're getting close to that. So we talked last week in verse 14 about the kings making war with the Lamb, and I told you that was the trailer for the Battle of Armageddon. We're almost there, and verses 15 to 18 is where we're starting. Then he said to me, I'm in Revelation 17, verse 15, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Okay, if you remember, I know you don't, so I'll help you. Revelation 13:1, I believe, is the beast comes up out of the sea. Yes. Revelation 13:1, then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Again, there's imagery. I had somebody send me a funny meme. Matt, it was Matt. Thank you, Matt. Barbian. Did I say it right? Barbarian. We had lunch today the other day, and I said, please help me pronounce your name, because I know I'm getting it wrong. He said, barbarian. So it's like barbarian, but it's the end of the word, not the barbarian. Okay. So Matt sent me a great meme today, and it's got a guy sitting with his house on fire. He's sitting, it's a house, right? I just saw it on my watch. He's sitting and his house is all on fire and it's burning up, and it says, an amillennial who thinks how did that say? I'm gonna mess it up. An amillennialist who thinks that everything is okay or something. What was that? It's This Is Fine. And the caption is, an amillennials who believe we're in the millennial reign of Christ right now. And the whole house is on fire. And the little guy is going, this is just fine. The house is on fire. Well, as you know, an amillennialist believes and a postmillennialist believes that we're in the millennium right now. Wow. All I can say to that is wow. I mean, if this is the millennium, it's nothing like the lion laying down with the lamb. They beat their swords into pruning hooks so that there's no war anymore. I mean, then all those prophets had just about everything wrong. Everything wrong. So while we believe in grammatical, literal, historical interpretation, it doesn't mean that God doesn't use symbolism to get across a literal event and the literal meaning. Okay, does that make sense? So when you see the beast coming out of the sea, there are different ideas for that. But one of the reasons I believe the Antichrist, the beast is the Antichrist, as I told you, coming up out of the sea is saying the Antichrist will be a human. Just like Christ was a human. Remember, there's the anti-Trinity and then there's the Trinity, right? And Christ is human. The beast, the Antichrist, is human. He comes up out of the sea, and the sea is all of humanity. He's a human. Well, when you get to one of the other reasons in the context, I believe that is here in 17, the waters which you saw, verse 15, chapter 17, where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. In other words, the waters are people. The sea seemingly is people. Okay? That's how you interpret symbolism, but with a literal meaning. Not just going, the whole book of Revelation just means we win. Or the book of Revelation ended in AD 70 when the temple was destroyed. That's postmillennialism. And ever since AD 70, the book of Revelation is over. It's all in the past. And we're living in the millennium right now, because the 1,000 years that we're going to see in a couple of chapters doesn't mean 1,000 years. It's just a number for a long time. Except 70 weeks of Daniel correspond with literal years. 3 days correspond. I mean, there's just all kinds of, a virgin is virgin. So let me say one other thing before I move any further. You never see a dispensationalist go liberal. Let me say that again. You never see a dispensationalist go liberal. The only people that go liberal come out of a Reformed tradition. Okay, I made a huge statement that if I made that on the internet, my entire Facebook page and Twitter X account would blow up. Why do you think I made that statement? What is different about how a dispensationalist looks at the Bible, and how, so people say, but does it matter? Does your eschatology, your end times viewpoints, do they really matter? Like, can you go to heaven and be an amillennialist? Of course you can. Can you go to heaven and be a postmillennialist? Of course you can. Adoniram Judson was a postmillennialist, a great missionary in Burma. So then why does it matter? Why do you think I would say you never see a dispensationalist go liberal? Any Protestant that goes liberal comes out of a Reformed tradition, which means they're Presbyterian, they're Anglican, they're Congregational, they're Methodist. Lutheran, for sure. I was trying to get them all. And there's probably a few others that I forgot, right? United Church of Christ. Why? Caleb and I have talked about this, so he's keeping mum right now to let you cogitate. What do you have to do to go liberal to the Word of God? What is the first step to begin to go liberal? Well, let's define. What are some tenets of liberalism when it comes to the virgin birth, the deity of Christ, the bodily resurrection? What do they believe about those things? What do liberals believe about the virgin birth? Did it happen or not? No. Okay. What about the literal death and resurrection of Christ? Literally. Do they believe that? No. Okay. So take a step back. I want you to think. I'm sorry. It's 9 o'clock and it's freezing outside and I expect you to think in church. I am so sorry. I apologize, but I'm going to do it anyway. What do you have to believe about the Bible to come to a position when the Bible states over and over and over again that Jesus would be born of a virgin, but you deny it? What do you have to come to believe? Go ahead. Kevin, you going to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's all symbolic. So I get
exactly.
I get to interpret.
100%.
That's your interpretation. It's not my interpretation.
Right.
You know, I'll interpret whatever we read.
So what about a literal? You will have a church on this street. I forget which way it is. The more liberal. There's 2 Lutheran churches. One is more conservative and would believe that Jesus actually came again from the tomb. The other one has their flags up all the time, right? And it's not the Christian flag, and it's not the flags of all the countries where they go to send missionaries either.
Noah's flag, right?
Yeah, it's Noah's flag. It's so exciting they've made Noah great again. So some of you won't even get that. Some of you just don't even understand what I just said. So what does that church believe about the resurrection? I mean, every year in Arizona, there was an article written in the paper by a liberal pastor saying what about the resurrection? What do you think he would say? Is it important or not? Do you think a liberal thinks the literal resurrection of Jesus Christ is important? Yes or no? Dee's the only brave one back there. She's like, no. Everybody else is like, no, it's a trick question. I'm going to look like a fool. No, they don't think it's important. I remember an article, I read it in church on Sunday morning of Easter. I said, let me read you what a heretic sounds like. That's kind of a Debbie Downer on Easter Sunday morning. And he said, it doesn't really matter whether Jesus literally came again from the tomb. It's that we know that he loved us and we should love each other. And then I read Paul, and Paul says, if he did not come again for the tomb, we're almost most miserable, and our whole belief system rests on the literal resurrection of Christ. Okay, so you have to believe, as Kevin said, that it's a symbol, it's spiritualized. Okay, so understand that when you spiritualize the entire book of Revelation, even if you're conservative and orthodox, you believe in the deity of Christ, you believe in the bodily resurrection, you believe the Bible is the Word of God and it's inspired, even if you believe all that, but if you get to Revelation or Daniel or Zechariah or Isaiah or Thessalonians or a bunch of other passages and say, oh, that's really spiritualized. It's a spiritual 1,000 years. There's no literalness behind it. You may stay orthodox, but history tells us that your kids and your grandkids won't. Because you've opened the door, here's a big word, with your hermeneutic. What is hermeneutic? Hermeneutic are the principles by which we interpret the Bible. You hear me say all the time, grammatical, literal, historical. Grammatical, literal, historical. That's the hermeneutic of the early church. Grammatical, literal, historical. Grammatical, literal, historical. When you start spiritualizing or allegorizing stuff, then you become God. You get to make your own decisions about what it means. So once you are in that tradition, it's really easy for you to say, well, if Revelation is spiritualized, maybe the virgin birth is spiritualized. Maybe one man and one woman for life is spiritualized, and you can have any sexual identity you want.
Sounds like someone's not saved.
Well, it is 100% not saved. So I just want to give that to you as why is eschatology important? It's not important in the, well, first of all, it's in the Bible, and we ought to preach the whole counsel of God. Okay, so I'm throwing that one out as a given. But it's not important. Can you be saved and disagree with Mike Sproul on eschatology? 100%. But man, you leave the door wide open for spiritualizing core doctrines of the Bible for your children and your grandchildren. Look where Princeton is as opposed to where Princeton started. Look where Brown is as opposed to, all these were seminaries set up by evangelical Orthodox. Princeton, Yale, Columbia, Brown, all were set up as Orthodox seminaries and colleges to train men for ministry. Do you know that as late as 1873, over 40% of the university and colleges in America had an ordained minister as their president? They had chapel. Well after the Civil War, almost every university and college in America had chapel where they preached the gospel.
When did the change begin?
Early 1900s with progressivism. Liberalism started in the seminaries and colleges in Germany in 1870 and 1880. I believe it's I'm not going to pronounce it right, Tübingen School begins that. And we sent a lot, Baptists, Presbyterians, we sent a lot of our young men there because we wanted an elite European education. And they came back and they started teaching at Princeton and Yale and Brown. And by 1910, 1920, you have a huge fight in all the denominations. So those guys came back in the 1880s and the 1890s and began teaching in all the seminaries. And by 1910, 1920, 1925, now you're having huge fights because those guys have had 25 years to teach all the new pastors, and now the new pastors are openly advocating false doctrine, and they're sending missionaries to mission fields that aren't winning people to Christ anymore. They're denying the deity of Christ. That's where you have the fundamentalist modernist controversy in the 1920s, 100 years ago, is when that breaks open, and the General Association of Regular Baptists breaks off. The Baptist Bible Fellowship breaks off. The Foundations Baptist Fellowship breaks off on the Baptist side. You have Presbyterians break off. They go down from Princeton and found Westminster. And so Princeton goes left and Westminster stays Orthodox. They're in Philadelphia. Every denomination had this problem in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Caleb, I saw your hand up and I didn't get to you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Are we, when you say that dispensationalist, spiritual liberal, are we talking political liberalism or theological?
Theologically liberal. And let me just say this. It doesn't mean that someone who once held to dispensationalism doesn't go liberal. What I mean is they don't go directly from dispensationalism into theological liberalism. There is always a waypoint. I'm watching a couple of younger men that I've been good friends with and even trained walk away from grammatical, historical, literal interpretation. One of them is actually the son of a very close friend of mine, and he's walking away from that. And he's left his church and resigned his church, and he's become so can you be a 5-point Calvinist and not be Reformed? 100% yes. 100% there have been 5-point Calvinist Baptists. Charles Spurgeon was one. However, in today's world of 20 and 30-somethings, which is your world, Caleb, it's almost impossible to go 5-point Calvinist and not go Reformed because it's a system. The Reformed system of amillennialism, infant sprinkling, because if you're Reformed, you've accepted infant sprinkling, right? And where is that in the Bible? You have to spiritualize Israel being set aside and the church becoming Israel. And since they did circumcision, now we do sprinkling. You have to spiritualize all of that. That's why I say the eschatology of the Reformers is set up in the 4th and 5th and 6th century to defend infant sprinkling. They have to have a rationale for spiritualizing and having sprinkling of infants when it's nowhere in the Bible. And that's just my opinion, but the eschatology doesn't come out of the early church. It doesn't. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
And because of that, it does spill over into your politics. Big time.
100% it does.
Today, people are listening to a Tucker Carlson
And hating on the Jews. And hating on the Jews. I mean, Tucker Carlson said in that whole big debate that dispensationalism, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but there's no people he despises more than dispensationalists.
Right.
Why? Because we take the promises of God literally to the Jewish nation. That doesn't mean that they're not persecutors of Christians. I mean, Messianic Jews in Israel, when we go there, you'll have a Messianic Jew as our tour guide. And he or she will tell you of what they go through. They can openly worship. But like to be a Messianic Jew and get a tourist license to take tours around is very, 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 very hard for Messianic Jew. The Jewish state run by more Orthodox Jews don't want Messianic Jews leading evangelical tour groups around their country. They want to have an Orthodox Jew do it. But to say that Christianity isn't openly proclaimed in Israel, it's not true. They have complete open, but there are little annoyances. Okay, so no one is saying that every current Jew is going to heaven. They have to place their faith in Jesus Christ just like everybody else. However, God's covenant to the ethnic group of Israel is never going to be faulted or thrown out. God doesn't lie. So what that view says is that when it says Christ came and fulfilled the law, they argue that fulfilling the law meant that everything was fulfilled and now we're living in the millennium. That there are no future, because Israel sinned and rejected the Messiah, there's no future, and Christ fulfilled all the law. That's not what the text means at all. And their whole theology rests on that view of the word fulfill. When you understand that in that day, the word fulfill simply meant kept. He kept the law in our place. So he could die in our place because he kept the law. He never sinned. That's what that verse means. They jump off that verse and say, see, because he fulfilled the law, then all the promises to the Jews were fulfilled in Christ, and there is no actual millennium. Well, when you spiritualize something that takes up many, 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 many chapters in the Bible, that's my point, is it really opens you up to heresy when it comes to major doctrines. Does that make sense? I know I'm chasing a little bit of rabbit here. Chris, go ahead.
Something I was need some clarity on, and maybe you can speculate, back to Revelation, the 10 horns of the kings.
Yep. Yeah, great question. So it seems to be a Western Confederacy. Now, in the last few years, more and more, there are some people that say it's Islam. The problem I have with that is simply that John says there's 7 hills. And he's writing, having been in the first persecution of Domitian, and he's writing from first worldwide persecution of Christians, happens under Domitian's reign. And this is one reason we know Revelation was written after the fall, because Irenaeus, who was a pastor who was a disciple of Polycarp, who was a disciple of John. So Irenaeus is literally one generation removed from John himself, tells us that the Revelation was written during the reign of Domitian. We know when that was, 85, 86 to 9. It was an 11-year reign. And so most people put it at 11-year reign, 14-year reign, something like that. Most people put it in the middle, it's like 90 AD. The post-millennialists all want Revelation written in 67 or 68. That's why the book refers to the fall of Jerusalem in 70. Except the earliest church father, who is a grandson of John. Irenaeus's pastor was Polycarp, and Polycarp grew up under John. Irenaeus says Polycarp told him Revelation was written under the reign of Domitian. We know when Domitian was, and it was, okay. So that all being true, historically accurate, then it would not be shocking for the people that heard it to realize when you say 7 hills, they're going to think of Rome. And John writes about the woman and the beast are on 7 hills. We saw that just recently. There is no way that they would have thought of any other city than Rome. Rome is built on 7 hills. You can go there and they can point the hills out to you as you drive around Rome. So if the image of Daniel is nations and the bronze legs are Rome, which most would accept, the toes are mixed of clay and brass, it's only logical that this is a revived Western Confederacy of some kind, with the 10 kings being more likely nations in the West of some kind. Could it be Germany, France, England, US, Canada? Think NATO. I used to say this all the time when people didn't know it, and then we've seen it in the last year. We did an exercise every year of defending Israel. We pulled our Aegis cruisers into Haifa. I've been a part of these exercises back in 12, 13, 14, 15. And NATO has a plan, primarily through the US, to defend Israel from missile attack. Well, what did we just get to see in the last couple of years? So are we still a part? I don't know who they are. It's a Western Confederacy of Nations, is my belief. Who you'll see at the Battle of Armageddon, though, is the king of the South. King of the East, king of the North, king of the South attack the Antichrist. We'll see that in a bit. And that's Islam. Islam is going, when the king of the West, we're going to see this in a second, sets himself up in the rebuilt temple as God, the Islam is not going to like that, you think? Do you think the Chinese are going to like that? And do you think the Russians are going to like that? Nope. That's the Battle of Armageddon. As they come to the valley of Jezreel and the Mount of Megiddo. And when you see it, when you go there and see it, you're like, wow. Wow, this is where the last battle is going to be. And I think that's what sets that stage. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me quickly read the verses and we'll be done. It says, the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot. So these 10 civic leaders will hate the religious leader. The religious leader is the harlot. Make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh and burn her with fire, for God has put it in their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdoms to the beast, until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman who you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Which city would that be to these 7 churches? Which great city reigns over the kings of the earth? When they read this? Rome. I mean, could it be something else? Yes, but they would have understood it to be Rome. They would have understood it to be Rome. Okay? Let me read my notes and we'll be done. The beast will set up his image in the temple. Obviously, the religious system and the beast's economic system are working together. But we see that the 10 kings will assist the beast in getting rid of the religious system or the harlot. Religious systems have always been used by the state to gain control. The secular state will mutilate and destroy this false religious system in their quest for sole authority. Clearly, verse 18 declares that the woman is from Rome. People disagree with me. I rarely use the word clearly when I do stuff like this because there are people that disagree with me. I just don't know how they do it. Other times I go, okay, I get it. But man, this one is very, very difficult. Verse 18, I mean, she is from the city, that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. I don't know how you don't read that as Rome. But okay, that is the only government at the time of the writing ruling over all the world. The literal city of Babylon was lying in ruins and is in such a state to this day. So there are some good people that believe it's a rebuilt city of Babylon that's ruling over the world at that time. I find that that's really, really a hard one. I had a seminary professor that was a great guy that believed that. And I mean, I loved him to death. He taught me. He knew more about Greek than I've ever known in my entire life and taught me how to love Greek. But I just think I agreed with him on about everything else, but when he taught me Daniel and Revelation, that was one I couldn't accept. But it's okay. Jesus has corrected him. He's in heaven now, and so he now knows better. But trust me, I'm joking. He was a brilliant man who loved the Lord. So anyway, comment or question? We're a couple minutes over. Not unusual. We'll start on chapter 18 next week. But I like to use this study to teach you more things than just the text. What I taught you today was how to interpret Scripture one more time. And I've taught that to you before, but I'm using eschatology, the doctrine of last things. Ecclesiology is the doctrine of the church, because the Greek word ekklesia means church. Eschatos means last. So that's why eschatology is the doctrine of last things. So I'm using this as a vehicle to teach you something more than just the notes. I want to help you in your pedagogy of adult education to think higher thoughts about, okay, why do we look at Revelation the way that we do? And we're under severe attack, like you just said, Candace Owen. Candace Owen just came out and said 2 weeks ago, if you go to a church like Littleton Baptist Church that teaches dispensationalism, you should find another church because your pastor's a heretic. And Tucker Carlson is right there with her. Here's what I've said for 40 years, and my dad said it before me. If you want to find somebody who's either demon-possessed or under demonic influence, find somebody that hates the Jews. When they hate the Jews, they're under demonic influence. And we're going to talk about it in the sermon today, but Herod the Great tried to kill Jesus. Demonically influenced. We're going to look at the book of Esther. Mordecai and Haman. Haman was going to wipe out the Jews. Demonically influenced, right? Pharaoh is going to kill the Jews. Jewish babies, right? Demonically influenced. In fact, I sent out to our deacons and our pastors a little article on there is a style, so a style is a rock stone, that they've just uncovered in Egypt that dates to the middle of the 13th century. So this would be in the period of the Judges, okay, if you're putting on your hat. And Pharaoh says that Israel is destroyed. He attacked Canaan, and Israel is destroyed. Was Israel destroyed? No. No. So where are the Canaanites? Where are the Perizzites? Where are the Jebusites? Where are the Philistines? They're gone. Because God's promises are true. Studying eschatology biblically gives me great confidence that God's promises are true.